Let's talk now to Douglas Gentile, who is Professor of Psychology at Iowa State University. Thanks very much indeed for joining us today. So we've all heard of young people playing games for hours at a time. What's the effect of that? It can't be a good thing.
Well, there are numerous effects. They include reduced school performance and both some mental health and physical health problems. But I think to call them opium is a little unfair, because if I gave 100 children opium, most of them would probably become addicted, whereas most children play video games and are not addicted. So I think it's a bit of a stretch to go that far. Nonetheless, we do know that the number one predictor of any addiction is access to it, and all children do have access to video games, and the more access we give, the more likely it may be a problem.
But gaming can be addictive, of course. How addictive can it be?
I don't know that we know how to answer that question exactly. Certainly, there are a number of children. What that number is tends to be, depending on the study, between 1% and 10% of youth gamers would classify as addicted from a clinical standpoint, which means in particular that it's damaging their school functioning, their social functioning, their family functioning, their occupational, psychological, and emotional functioning. That's what we mean by an addiction, is that it's harming other areas of their lives. And about 1% to 10% of gamers worldwide would classify as having that level of dysfunction.
Is there an argument, though, that games need to be addictive to a degree for them to be exciting and for games makers, developers, to make their money?
Well, I certainly think that when you use the word addictive from the game maker's perspective, that's seen as a good thing, because it does usually mean more money. But there are certain techniques that we know are perhaps a little more addictive than others, such as the same mechanism that works under gambling that makes it addictive by having what's called a variable reward schedule, that you might get a really big payout at some point. This is the whole argument about loot boxes that we were talking about last year. And so there are some ways of making games that are still exciting but don't have quite the same addictive potential.
When it comes to children's access to gaming, is it something that would benefit from being formalized rather than it being managed by parents, for example?
I tend to think parents are in the best position for this. The problem is parents often aren't able to know exactly how much time their children are gaming, especially when it becomes a problem. Children sometimes get up in the middle of the night. They set their alarm for 1 o'clock and get up to game in the middle of the night, or they do things to hide their gaming. So parents, although they're in the best position to actually help regulate it, if the gamer's having a problem, many times they've found a way around the parental restrictions.
Are there any, we're talking a lot about the negatives here, but are there any positives to gaming?
Oh, there are many positives. Certainly the first one is entertainment. There's nothing wrong with being entertained by them. We have found in several studies, for example, that when children play pro-social games, where these include themes of helping other game characters or caring about or for other game characters, the children gain in empathy and become more helpful and cooperative in the real world. So it's not that games are bad, it's that they have tremendous power to influence us, which is why we like them. If you play a game and it doesn't affect you, you call it boring. So we want to be influenced by games. We just need to be thoughtful about it so that we're maximizing the benefits while minimizing the harms.
And during the pandemic, of course, more of our lives moved online. What effect has that had on the amount of gaming that people do?
The correct answer is we don't really yet know. There was one study that came out of Germany that showed that children's screen time basically doubled during the pandemic. And what part of it changed depended on what the age of the child was. The older children, and certainly the boys, the gaming went way up. So again, this comes back to the issue of access. The more experience and exposure that you have, the more likely it is that it could become a problem.
Douglas Gentile, thanks very much indeed for joining us on the programme today.
My pleasure.